How's it going, everybody? Noah Hiles, Chris Carter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and this is a new thing we'll be doing. We're starting a Pitt mailbag.
Woo!
And if you're a reader of this paper or read it online, you know that a ton of different people have a mailbag where you can email questions, or sometimes it's a live mailbag, a live chat, and you can ask your favorite reporter some questions about the teams that you root for. We're doing things a little different with the Pitt one that we're starting up, since we're both kind of new guys on the beat, especially for here, about a month in for each of us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to make it a video show. We will have some transcribed answers at the bottom when we post this. And I think this is going to be something we will run every Tuesday. So you can reach out to both of us, find us on social media or our emails, which will be at the bottom of everything we write. And if you ever have any questions, shoot them our way, and we will discuss them in our weekly mailbag for Pitt Sports. Again, I'm Noah Hiles. Alongside me is Chris Carter. Chris, how's it going, buddy?
It's great. We just heard Pat Narduzzi talk on a Monday.
Yes.
He said that Pitt's effort was outstanding, and a lot of Pitt fans were like, "What were you watching?" Actually, effort wasn't the issue in that game.
No,
it was cohesion. It was chemistry. It was timing, and you saw him kind of call out his own coaching staff, including himself, before that started. Now I know that could be a lot of coach speak, as we see a lot with Pat Narduzzi, and coaches. It's not just him. Every coach uses coach speak at some point, and he just uses it a lot. But I do think that plays a lot into what's going on with this Pitt team right now.
I completely agree. I think that there is talent all over the roster. There's obviously a lot of experience with how many people they had coming back, but we've yet to really see all of that talent click at the same time in the same game. We've seen it sometimes with the defense, sometimes with the offense, sometimes on special teams even, but they haven't really played a complete game from in all three phases for 4 straight quarters. So that's our just instant analysis here, coming again right back from Pat Narduzzi's press conference on Monday. But we're here to answer your questions, and we'll get started right now. If you look at the bottom of the screen here, you'll be able to see we'll have a running ticker with questions that were sent in via Twitter, DM, or email. And so I think somewhere between 8 to 8. Okay, so we'll start off, and Lee has the first question. And actually, Lee isn't the only person that asked this. I got this multiple times. I don't know about you, Chris, but where is Rodney Hammond?
Yeah, everyone's asking that question.
Well, right? I'll tell you where he is on Saturdays. He's actually
right next to
us. The wall separating where the writers sit in the press box, and to the left of where we sit, I think, is where all the Pitt injured players sit.
Yeah. And
you can hear Rodney cheering on his teammates every single game Saturday. Yeah. Every Saturday, we hear him and a couple of others screaming and yelling and everything. And he's passionate. He wants his team to do well. But
it's not just cheering either. There are some expletives that
get
thrown out
there. He's a passionate guy, as he should be. He's a good football player, and he wants to see his team do well. But I'm sure you're not asking where he is physically, but where he is in the process of coming back. And that's a very good question. We last saw Rodney Hammond play against West Virginia. Yeah. He looked to be Pitt's best running back in that game. And he sustained an injury, looked to be the lower body. I think it was like his left ankle, I believe.
I would say he was wearing a boot on his left foot.
Yeah. So something around there. And it was on the final offensive drive that Pitt had that evening. And we haven't seen him since. And
it's been a month.
Yes. And it's a really good question as to when he will be back. I honestly don't know. I will say this, though. For a while, we didn't even see Rodney Hammond at practice. He was kind of MIA, and we didn't see him around the facility or anything. The fact that we're at least seeing him now on the sidelines for pregame and at practice, just even if he is in sweatpants, not working out, the fact that he's at least visible, I would take as maybe a sign of optimism that he would come back. But again, injuries aren't really disclosed very much with this team, and it's hard to speculate how serious whatever he has wrong with them is.
We're also not allowed to tell you guys what happened at practice. We can kind of say he's around the building and things like that, but like that there's and this is also, we could talk. This also leads into the struggle that is reporting injuries in college sports.
Yes.
Coaches don't have to tell you anything.
No.
Pat Narduzzi, his niceness to us, his courtesy that he feels that he gives us is that when a player is out for the year, then he will tell us. But, if that guy could come back in a bowl game, he will not tell you if he's hurt or not. I mean, Desmond Alexander missed significant time last year and only, came back this last game, but they won't tell you. So Rodney, he could be out until the end of the ACC regular season schedule. I don't think it's that bad though. From what I've seen and what I've gotten the feel from is that he will be back sometime this month. And I think I get the impression that they are expecting him. But also, I do wonder what will happen if Israel Abanikand's injury is serious, because he did not finish that game against Georgia Tech. I also wonder if they win that game if he's playing against Georgia Tech.
And that's a good point, Carter, with the coming back this month. If you look, they have a game against Virginia Tech and then a bye week. Maybe we see him after the bye week. But again, we don't even know technically what is wrong with Rodney Hammond. So we can't even begin to speculate when he will be back.
We just saw him in a walking boot at the podium.
I would venture to say it's probably not a season-ending thing. I don't think so.
I have it on good authority.
Yes.
It's not season.
All right.
We just don't know how long.
He will be back. Hopefully we see him sometime in October, because he is a fun football player to cover.
Yes, he is.
What else do we got?
Next question comes from Pete. Is Kedon Slovis' job in jeopardy? Now, Noah, a lot of people on Twitter were like, put Nate Yardell in, man.
I mean, listen, it's just in the city's DNA right now to be mad at quarterbacks. Not named Kenny Pickett.
Not named Kenny Pickett.
Yes.
But to be honest, and we asked Pat Narduzzi this, and he was like, yeah, Keaton actually played well in the second half. This is his team. He put to bed any idea that Nate Yarnell could go in. Now, here's the thing. Knowing Pat Narduzzi, there could absolutely be a discussion in a back room somewhere with a bunch of coaches like, look, if we see this, and this all goes down the drain, let's put in Nate and just try to run the ball a lot and do that. There might be that conversation somewhere in a Pitt facility, but they are not going to publicize that. They don't want Keaton everything. I think a big part of what Keaton's struggling with right now is confidence.
Yep.
And the last thing you need to do is make him think that a redshirt freshman who played one game against Western Michigan, and that's the only game
he threw the ball 12 times.
And threw the ball 12 times is the person that's going to replace him.
And you bring up the confidence thing. If you look, anytime Narduzzi's been asked about Keaton, either by me or Chris or by anyone else who has the opportunity to ask Pat questions during the week or before or after a game, he has not been very critical of him at all. He'll admit, he needs to be better in certain areas, but compared to other guys who have, I wouldn't even say more job security, but who have been around a little bit longer, he feels more open to being critical with them. Where with Keaton, he is quick to point out the good way earlier than he will point out the bad with Kedon Slovis. And there's probably been more bad than good so far.
I agree.
Through 4.5 games that we've seen him play in, or 3.5 games that we've seen him play in. But I'll just say this on top of everything that you pointed out. There's just no way, unless if they lose to Virginia Tech and then probably lose another one in this month, we're going to see Keaton Slovis from here on out. Yeah. It's just, I think it might be a principle thing as well. Just what's this send to other quarterbacks who might transfer in here?
Right.
Like, am I going to really have that short of a leash? You talked about the confidence thing. He doesn't want him looking over his shoulder. And talent-wise, listen, Nate Yarnell got the job done against Western Michigan. But again, he threw 12 passes. They were very, very, very conservative in that game. He showed some poise and confidence, but he doesn't probably have that performance against even a bad ACC team like Georgia Tech.
If you needed him to make plays in the big moments, it would be a very tall task.
Correct. I honestly think, and while he hasn't been available to play in games in a while either, if everyone's healthy, I still think if Slovis isn't the guy anymore, they're probably going to look to Patty before Nate Yarnell. So that's our take on it. I personally still think we see Kedon Slovis, barring him being injured again. Kedon Slovis probably starts every football game for Pitt for the remainder of his time here, be that just the rest of this season or if he comes back next year.
I hear that. Let's talk about some offensive scheming. We have this question from Andrew. That's why did Frank Cignetti switch up Pitt's offense so much when it worked last year?
Well, that's what you get when you hire a new coordinator. One, Frank Cignetti has always been, a guy who loves to run the football. Where Whipple, it was pretty clear if you watched them last year, he was very pass heavy. And that was the talk even before we knew, what things were going to shake out like up to this point in the preseason during camp, that they're going to run the football more. That was the big message. And honestly, it kind of suits the team's strength.
See, that's the thing about this. I don't think Frank Cignetti was always just going to just run the football no matter what. I think he is playing to the strengths that he sees in this offense. I think he sees this offensive line as more of an asset than the reliance in the overall passing chemistry. I think he sees Israel Abanikanda and Rodney Hammond and thinks those two guys can win me a lot of football games. But, if Jordan Addison was still here, they'd be throwing out the ball a lot more.
I mean, and that's another thing. I think that, like what you said, their best players are should be built around the run game. They're the probably the biggest weakness on this offense right now is depth at receiver.
Yeah.
Or production at receiver. I think they have one guy they really trust
Jared Wayne
to throw the ball to, and he didn't even look that good Saturday, I think, against Georgia Tech.
He had a drop. But I mean, he made some really tough catches. Again, that one drop over the middle was bad, but Jared, I mean, there was one back shoulder pass 30 yards downfield, one-on-one corner. I mean, he just skies up, pulls it in. Keaton has to learn to trust him.
Correct. And I think that's a big part of it is last year they had a quarterback that they really trusted. And it didn't matter if it was Frank Cignetti calling the plays or Mark Whipple or Chris Carter or Noah Hiles. You were able to look and see, hey, that guy in number 8, he's pretty darn good. And we're going to let him win us some football games, regardless of, what our playbook looks like, how many formations we might have out of the gun compared to under center and everything. They catered to the best player on their team, and that's kind of what they're doing this year, I think, with Abanikanda and Hammond. When they're healthy, those are the two best players on this offense.
But also, I think there's a lot that gets blown up in this city. Todd Haley, as much as you were talking about the quarterback position, Todd Haley brought up like last week when I think it was on the Pat McAfee show, and he said you can score 40 points a game in the city of Pittsburgh as your offense can light up the scoreboard, break records, and they will still call for your head as an offensive coordinator.
That is true.
And for all the people that are saying, bring back Mark Whipple. Do you know how much hate mail I got about Mark Whipple before last season when Kenny Pickett started? Even during last season, when they lost to Western Michigan, people were calling for his head. They were saying, this guy needs to go. Why is Pat Nardo just getting this guy around? And then as soon as Kenny Pickett was just Kenny Pickett lighting it up, it was, that guy's a genius. Why they let him go? All these listen. Offensive coordinators take time. It needs time. It's the same thing with Matt Canada over at the Steelers. It takes time to build chemistry, especially when you got guys that aren't used to playing with each other. If Frank Cignetti took over and Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison and that team was there from last year, you'd see a much different offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new coordinator. It's a new quarterback. Those are the two most important things for the offense. And you can have returning pieces in other spots, but that's gonna take time to build chemistry. That's not an excuse. They should be way better.
They should be better
than what they.
And it's not an excuse. It's just a reality. It's like this is Mark Whipple's system wasn't some sophisticated genius thing. It was Kenny, go out there and win me some football games. Yeah. That's what I mean. And I remember I wrote because I covered this team the last 2 years. I wrote when they lost to Western Michigan. His offense, Mark Whipple's offense, was like the Justice League, but Kenny Pickett was Superman, and everyone else was like B-level heroes. Like there was no Batman, there was no Wonder Woman, there's no Green Lantern. It was just guys, Hawk and Dove, people you don't live.
Jordan Addison wasn't a superhero.
He eventually became that, but in a lot of those games early on, even Jordan Addison the year before, he became another Superman. They were two Supermen on the same team at one point, especially against Virginia late in the year, but. Early on, it was like, Kenny, just do everything. And that's where I think that Pitt had to find a way. Hey, we got to get a guy who can come in here and balance this team. And of course, this is more of a balance towards the run side right now. But again, they're playing to their strengths. And that's not to say that Mark Whipple's a bad coordinator. I think he caught a lot of heat for things that weren't his fault. The year before last year, there were a lot of open plays that Kenny Pickett had, but Taysier Mack would drop passes. Other guys would drop passes. Even Jordan Addison was dropping passes. Pitt's receivers stepped up as a whole last year, and that allowed the offense to flow. Again, it's playing to your strengths, and right now, this year, they know their strengths are running the football with your top two backs, and I think the biggest problem with Georgia Tech is both of those guys were out. Vincent Davis ran hard, but he had 2 fumbles that would be uncharacteristic of Izzy or Rodney.
All right, let's keep it moving here. I actually really like this next one. It kind of goes off of what we were saying. Elizabeth asks, do you feel like this team is living in Kenny Pickett's shadow? I think there's part of it that
maybe for fans.
I think against its will, I think the program is simply because the guy last year was such an anomaly with Pitt where
it was
you were waiting to see them, kind of fall off.
You were waiting for the collapse that it didn't come.
There was excitement and the collapse. I mean, they lost 2 games that they were favorites in, and both of them were home, but in reality, it was still a very, very successful season, the most successful season they've had since Dan Marino and company were here. So it was a little bit of an anomaly there, and Kenny Pickett, deservedly so, got a lot of credit for it.
He did.
Because for a long time, really since Marino, the Panthers haven't had that guy at quarterback. Their best player has not been a quarterback.
Don't you dare disrespect Rod Rutherford like that.
I mean, he wasn't the best player on his team at that time. They had a pretty good receiver to throw the ball
Who
to
was that?
when Rod Rutherford. Yeah. So that's my point, I think, is it was just such a different experience for so many Pitt fans that Kenny Pickett, and again, he deserved to get all the credit that he has, but it just meant so much more that it was so new and exciting that this year was always going to be, at least it had the chance to be the year after Kenny Pickett. And was 2021 just an outlier? Was it just the Kenny Pickett magic year? Or is this a legitimate program? I still think we're finding out those answers. I'm not ready to just say that, well, they lost to Georgia Tech and it was a bad loss. But I still think this program has made some notable progress. And if it, recovers from this Georgia Tech debacle and still goes to the ACC championship, that's progress. It's not obviously what it accomplished last year, but that's still something of note, where right now, anytime there is a struggle, you're just going to be reminded of how good it was when the guy was here, especially because he's practicing at the same location. He's playing home games at the same stadium.
Mm-hmm.
He's not too far away. So I just think unintentionally, the program just needs to achieve something, and then the whole Kenny Pickett magic thing will kind of start to fade away a little bit.
I mean, and part of the Kenny Pickett magic was also that was a really talented team last year. And I think this is a talented team this year. But what happened last year was there was a lot of resilience. When they lost to Western Michigan, they were angry. Kenny Pickett called a team meeting. They said that won't happen again. And the RPO was not an issue for most of the rest of the year. Miami got him a couple times with it, and that's why Miami won. But Wake Forest, when I studied all of college football, they were the most efficient RPO offense. They just dissected you with the RPO. And the first quarter, they did that to Pitt. But for 3 quarters, they shut it down against them. And that adjustment, that resilience, I think was huge for them last year. We have to see how resilient they are this year. Tennessee is different when you're playing Western Michigan. That was more so of, I think you could get up for that game easily. And I don't think they didn't get up for Georgia Tech. But how do they respond this week against Virginia Tech at home after a disappointing loss? Does the passing offense get going? Can the defense start to get home a bit more with the pass rush? Those things can bounce this team back. Now, I think the disappointing thought thing here is that some Pitt fans were hoping this was playoff time. This was
and
the
it
year.
Could have been.
It could have been.
They could be a top 10 team right now if they just didn't lose to Tennessee in overtime and simply
and again,
didn't play atrocious on Saturday.
Tennessee's very good.
Yeah.
They're a top 10 team right now. And they lost to them with Nick Patty playing on one leg in overtime. Do people understand that that was this team? I don't think this is a bad team. They had a bad game. They had the passing offense didn't work. Their defense folded late. But again, I don't even put that on the defense. The offense kept putting them in bad spots. The 2 fumbles. That was one bad game there. If they have another bad game against Virginia Tech, then we're talking, okay, bigger problem here. But this is still a team that can win their division and go in. Because I even thought about this at one point. If they lose to Georgia, it's not like Georgia Tech's going to have a tiebreaker over them. Georgia Tech's not winning out the rest of the year. They need to make sure North Carolina, the other teams that are in there, Miami, they got to make sure that they beat out those Syracuse because they started up hot. They've got to handle their business against those teams, and that won't be easy if they play like this. But if the defense gets back to stopping the run, if they get back to getting after the quarterback, if they can catch those 5, 2 of those 5 interceptions that they dropped in that last game, they'll beat those teams. I do think that.
I agree. We got about enough time for, I'd say, 1 or 2 more. Let's pick some good ones here. Up to you.
We got time for a few of these. We just won't have to answer as long. This one coming from Matt. Where's the defensive line? They're not playing up to the hype at all. It's a good question. I mean, they haven't crushed it. There's been flashes like Kalijah Cansey had a sack that I thought was very important in this last game. But you're right. Hababall, and maybe part of it's they're still not.
Where's
100%.
The defensive line is on the sidelines because most of their defensive linemen have been hurt this year.
Yeah, they've been banged up. They've been struggling. Hababall Donato missed the last game. He wasn't that active in this game. Desmond Alexander's missed a lot of time. Deion Hayes isn't playing.
Devin Danielson.
I mean, he was back this game. And you saw an immediate impact.
And he played well. But Narduzzi actually pointed out today, Monday, how the offensive line has yet to play. The 5 starters who returned,
Yep.
they have yet to play one complete game together.
Yeah.
And you could say the same for the defensive line. I
Mhm.
mean, they the last time they were really all on the field healthy was in the first half against West Virginia. And then Deslin Alexander went down. We
Yep.
saw Habakkuk Baldonado go down. Just everyone. And thankfully, they're a little bit deeper there, I think, than the offensive line. So Pitt shouldn't have as much of an excuse. You see guys like John Morgan, who I think has had a really good year.
Yeah.
And other guys starting to rotate in there. But when you have these star players who had these huge expectations coming in, yeah, you do expect more. But I think injuries have played a factor in that. I also think scheme from opponents. Teams know, hey, we can't hold on to the ball because they're going to be here.
They're coming.
And if you look, I mean, a lot of the games, they do have constant pressure. It's just not being able to finish it, not being able to get there. And I think opponents know that we got to get rid of the ball quick when we're playing Pitt. And now it's on Pitt to make that adjustment, saying, all right, well, we need to draw something up to get there even faster. And there's been flashes of that, like Chris said, but it's not all the way there yet. But Pitt's pass rush didn't really come on until ACC play last year.
Yep.
I could easily see that happening again.
I mean, that's the thing, is that they stacked a lot of sacks against a lot of teams.
Yeah.
Syracuse, Duke, those games, they were just bullying those guys up front. And some of it was also coming together at times, right? Some of it, like they couldn't get after Caleb Ellaby and the Western Michigan offense. That it wasn't happening there. People were saying, oh, so much for that pass rush. And then last year it came together. Part of it's also playing together. Heck, Cam Hayward's talking about that with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, despite him being there. Alex Highsmith, they got Larry Ogunjobi. I know TJ Watt's missing, but he's like, we got to play together. We're not timing our moves together. So that to me is a big part of this too, is some of these guys, they need to have that timing to know, hey, if I stunt this way, this guy's going to twist off me at this time, and I'm going to be able to trust him to go get the quarterback. But a lot of this too, when you look at what's going on right now, Pitt does lead the ACC with 16 sacks right now, but typically they would have a lot more.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see there. I think 16 sacks over 5 games, it's just short of 4 sacks a game. You want to, I think if you're Pitt, you want like 5 sacks a game. That's the average that you want to have there. And they were just shy of that last year, 51 across 14 games. Really good numbers there. But I do think they'll pick it up.
All right, let's do one more, and then we got to get to work on some other Pitt things here, but I think this has been good.
Brian asks, was Georgia Tech the worst loss in Pat Narduzzi's career?
Well, if you're a gambling man like yours truly, yes, it is. And the
don't
numbers,
be like him. He has issues.
The numbers back it up, though. I wrote about this in my 5 takeaways. Pat Narduzzi has lost 4 times to a double-digit favorite. Ironically enough, all of them have come at home.
Yeah.
And so as a double-digit favorite, 10 or more points, first loss came against North Carolina, and I believe 2017. North Carolina entered that game. It was on a Thursday night with 1 win.
Was that a Mitch Trubisky net game?
I don't think – no, Mitch was gone by then.
Okay.
But that was his first 10-point favorite loss. And then it's the 3rd year in a row now where he's lost at home as a double-digit favorite. 2020 was against NC State. 2021, obviously last year against Western Michigan, the one that got a lot of attention. But this year, the NC State and Western Michigan losses, they were both 14-point favorite. And those 2 losses, 22 points. I mean, that's a big spread for any opponent, especially an ACC program. And just that alone, I think you would have to argue that it is his worst loss. And then you consider, what Georgia Tech, it snapped, I think, an 8-game losing streak against Power 5 opponents for the Yellow Jackets. And they just fired their head coach and AD.
That's the other thing about that.
It's just a bad program. And for you to be the ACC champions, starting ACC play at home, it's a bad look. I think it is his worst loss.
Georgia Tech ranked next to last in total offense and dead last in total defense. For you to lose that game, because the other thing is that, again, there were so many moments that this Pitt team could have found a way to just, if Eric Hallett catches one of those pick sixes, they win the game.
Georgia Tech did not play an amazing game.
No, and anyone that's telling you that also don't know what they talk about.
If you look, I mean, Pitt scored right at the end of the first half, went up 7-6, and it was kind of like an understanding. It's like, all right, well, this is where they're going to win. They're just going to win ugly. And Pitt could have won that game up to when Georgia Tech scored its second touchdown with like a minute left and made it a 2-score game again. They had 3 timeouts, were down 19-14 with under 2 minutes left. Their defense gets a stop they probably go down. They have a decent chance to go down and score and
I
win.
mean, you saw Keaton on those last 2 drives. As soon, and again, this was why I wrote in my analysis, this is on the coaches for not trying more to pass the ball before this game. These guys needed to know, hey, if I do this, this guy will do this. These guys needed to have those experiences of successes and failures to build on. And then you're finding these out in the middle of a conference game where this team's kind of digging up in you, and you don't have time to be wrong anymore.
Yeah.
And then by the time that you finally got it going, you're down 2 scores, and now you're playing catch up, and your defense is gassed.
And that's the thing. That's why I think it's the worst loss. It wasn't like a team came in here and scored 44 points.
Yeah.
Which was what Western Michigan did.
Right.
Pitt had every opportunity to take this game over with dropping pick sixes, just making bad play calls, dropping passes that were thrown well, fumbling the football, turning it over through the air with interceptions, not getting the ball into the end zone. I mean, I think there were 4 different punt plays where there was a penalty.
Yeah.
Either a legal block in the back running into the punter once. Pitt did everything it could to lose this game, despite Georgia Tech giving them so many opportunities to take a lead and run away with it. And that's why I think it's Narduzzi's worst loss, is because everything that they could have done to lose was done.
If any one of those things happen, any of those interceptions get caught, if they get a stop on that last drive, if the offense, their first passing first down that they converted was late in the second, was that drive when they throw a touchdown to Gavin Bartholomew. And again, the touchdown that he throws to Jaden Bradley, the first of the 2, when he breaks open, and I break this down in my film room article that's up on Monday. But like, Jaden Bradley's so open to start that play. Like, he just made the safeties has come down. He beats his man. There's no one in front of him. And I literally heard a Pitt player say, "Throw it!"
Yeah.
Like Kedon Slovis doesn't trust himself yet.
Correct.
And I think that when he does, which I think he can, he has a heck of an arm. He can put the ball in some really special places. And I also went over that in my film room. But I really think a lot of this is about, they need that energy going. They need that chemistry going forward. They need to play together. They need to trust each other, and they need those reps. They need to have had enough of them in this Georgia Tech game to beat Virginia Tech. That's also not a good team, because if they play like this, if they play not a lot better, if they play like this going into Louisville, they're going to get smacked.
Can't disagree with you. So that will conclude our first ever mailbag, ever video mailbag for the Post-Gazette, I think. Well, even if they've done it before we were here,
we're the best version.
Yeah, we're the best version. Yeah. I mean, look at us. How can you not love us?
Take that, Paul Zeiss.
Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already to our YouTube, the Post-Gazette Sports YouTube channel. We're trying to build up those subscribers and keep bringing new content like this.
Yes, indeed.
And read our stuff at postgazette.com. We'll see you next week. We'll keep doing this every Tuesday.